Good afternoon and welcome back to another ironic introduction to another video. Today I'm doing a fight-by-fight breakdown for Abyss of Legends Path 3. As always, there's a link to the spreadsheet in the description below. Pretty much this whole video is me reading the spreadsheet to you, so if you'd rather just read it for yourself, go ahead and check out that link, as well as a link to the Reddit where I found this map and a link to the map itself that I am using for the pathing and how I'm setting this up. That said, let's dive into Darkhawk. So the node for Darkhawk is that the defender has a permanent armor up. While tech champions have an armor up, they are immune to AAR and Nullify. If this armor up is removed, essentially just from an armor break, it returns on a 15-second cooldown after any armor breaks on them expire. But while the defender has an armor up, they gain a charge when struck, and at 10 charges steal the attacker's power. Common attackers for this Darkhawk are Aegon, Torch, Magneto, Void. I do not recommend you boost. If you're looking at masteries, use Despair if you plan on heal reversing. If you're going to use Aegon, depending on how comfortable you are with the Luke Cage fight, ramping Aegon here can save you some revives. That's my recommendation. It just really depends on how confident you are with Luke Cage, but having some extra combo, this Darkhawk is a very simple fight with Aegon and can really help you out during, later on. Essentially, what you're going to want to do is mine the charges and bait SP1s from Darkhawk, because SP2 will push him to stealth mode, and that's going to put you in a bad time. You don't want to knock him down when you pushed him to an SP2, and you don't want to knock him down and let him SP2, because whenever he changes phases, either from the auto block mode or the stealth mode, he's going to regenerate a ton of health, and it's a bad time. If you're using Torch or a heal reversal, though, heal reversal is king. You're going to push Darkhawk to an SP2, bait the SP2, and then knock him down. Just mind the charges, because you don't want to accidentally push him to an L3 on accident. And then heal reversal is where you're getting all of your damage. Void, same concept. Heal reversal is king. You push Darkhawk to an SP2, you bait the SP2, and then you knock him down. Just, again, mind the charges, because you don't want to push him to an L3. Also keep in mind that for Void, Petrifies and Fear of the Void can cause him to reverse power gain when he steals your power. So be mindful when you're pushing him to an L2. Try and use your L1s a lot so that you don't have him constantly draining below 2 bars of power, and then you're missing your heal reversal opportunity. And then finally, if you're using Magneto, you're going to build up to an L2 and then launch the L2. Now you don't have to worry about the power steal. Just constantly parry heavy charge to gain prowesses and refresh the armor break. From here, you're going to push Darkhawk to a little past a bar of power, launch the L3, then bait an SP2, and then heavy punish for big heal reversals. It'll trigger 2 heals here. Alternatively, you could push Darkhawk to an SP2, launch the L3 immediately after you bait the SP2 for a heal reversal here as well. Next up is Luke Cage. Every 20 seconds, Luke Cage gains an unstoppable and unblockable buff, each lasting until he is successfully intercepted. Common attackers here are Aegon, Stealth Suit, She-Hulk, Ghost, and technically anyone with really good intercept skills. I do recommend you boost here, no specific masteries. For all champions against this Luke Cage, he is incredibly and super strangely passive at the worst times. If you're trying to rely on regular intercepting skills, wait for the Enrage timer, because once that triggers, he has an increased aggression, and this will give you access to reliable intercepts. If you're using Aegon, Heavy Charge Unstoppable method works, as long as it's timed to hit during Luke Cage's dash attack. This is the same way that Ghost's intercepts works, as long as it's the defender's dash. Slow debuff champions, you are able to remove the frustration of Unstoppable, which means you can more reliably go for standard intercepts without being punished, but do be aware that Luke is still unblockable, so if you don't get that intercept, watch out for any kind of punishment. Next up is Old Man Logan. Old Man Logan regenerates an additional 5,000 health per second, and is immune to heal block debuffs. Let me fix that real quick. And keep in mind that this is in addition to his regular healing, and it's based on his regular healing. So you're going to want to use Torch, Void, Mysterio, Warlock. Technically, anyone can kind of do this fight if you've got really good damage output. Just be careful. No, I don't recommend you boosting if you're going to use heal reversal anyways. I do recommend you have Despair if you're planning on heal reversing. If you're going to use Torch, do not use your pre-fight. Heal Reversal is king, so you really want that Incinerates. They have better heal reversal potential. Try not to let him special unless his regeneration is close to expiring, because when he specials, he loses the regen, and then you're not heal reversing. Same for Void. Heal Reversal is king, but same concept. Don't let him special until his regen is close to expiring. That way, you're getting the max amount of heal reversal time. And then finally, if you're not using a heal reversal champion, then when Old Man Logan specials, he loses his regen. So essentially, you're just going to want to bait the specials when his regen refreshes. So punish him for 12 seconds, and then right when the regen refreshes, you want to bait a special as soon as possible. Also, things like Despair and multiple debuffs can really help minimize the healing. The reason I have Mysterio and Warlock here is because their heal blocks are not debuffs, so they do have access to heal blocking this Old Man Logan if you don't happen to have a Torch or a Void. Next up is Havoc. Havoc has critical hits, increases the defender's power rate, and the defender gets Scaling Furies on special attacks. Warlock, Doc Ock, Willpower Mastery, and any non-robot are the common answers here. Yes, I recommend you boosting. I definitely recommend you take Willpower if you're not using a robot. If you're using Warlock, he is better if awakened and better at higher sig. Essentially, his awakened ability is free damage versus Havoc, and it's all about that parry heavy or parry counter heavy gameplay. For a less punishing playstyle, you could also do parry light and then alternate heavying or dashing back depending on whether Havoc is stunned or not. This essentially just gives you an extra moment to respond, because if Havoc does medium, then you're not going to get the stun from the reparry. And if he goes medium light, then you are going to get the stun. And that trip up there will be what causes you to maybe go for a heavy and he's not stunned. And then you're going to get hit and then punished and then comboed into oblivion. Next up is if you're using Doc Ock. You do need Doc Ock awakened if you're taking on this fight. His awakened ability essentially allows him to power drain on hit when Havoc is power locked. This gives him a really good damage opening and allows for you to heavy corner Havoc for extended periods of time. And then from here, Willpower will help keep you healthy for when plasma detonates just happen to go off. Next up is if you're using Willpower in any non-robot champion, the feedbacks heal you. They trigger Willpower. It's a relatively low attack rating, so Havoc, so a little bit of heavy baiting and Willpower gives really great sustain versus the plasma detonations, which will do about 4 to 7% of your max health depending on who you happen to be bringing in. Next up is Dormammu. Every 10 buffs that expire or are nullified on the attacker, place a 15-second Fate Seal debuff on the attacker. If this is removed early, it deals 100% defender's attack as direct damage. Essentially, don't use Aegon here. Torch is one of the common answers, but technically you can use anyone. Yes, I recommend you boost, and specifically you need to turn the Dexterity Mastery off so that you can properly bait L1s without having to worry about triggering it and without having to worry about, degenning from losing that buff. Essentially just turn Dexterity off, bait special ones, and this is a really free fight. Next up is Joe Fix-It. Every 10 seconds, Joe gains a buff or the attacker gains a debuff. If you special 3, it removes all of Joe's buffs gained this way, and your heavy attacks purify all debuffs on yourself. Joe Fix-It is immune to Nullify and Fate Seal. You can use anyone to take him down. Yes, I recommend you boost up. Limber will probably help you depending on how you want to take this fight, and maybe Willpower depending on how much you're dealing with his debuffs. Essentially, if Joe starts with the healing factor and you don't want to just quit out of the fight because you want to maybe get the most out of your life, just force block and tank a heavy attack. Just let him heavy attack you. This will reset his buff, and hopefully you don't get the healing factor again, so you could potentially get some damage in. And then from here, it's just a matter of relying on RNG and the whole Abyss stun on hit, and not getting stunned, and Limber maybe saving you if you do happen to get stunned, so you can get some damage in on that revive. Additionally, just in general, you're going to want to bait special 2s to avoid chip damage, because his L1, it's not the worst, but it is some chip damage. Next up is Mordo. Mordo, every 10 buffs that expire or are nullified on the attacker, place a 15-second Fate Seal debuff on the attacker. If this is removed early, it deals 100% of the defender's attack as direct damage. Same concept as Dormammu, but not as fatal. Essentially, just don't use Aegon. Common attackers here are Torch or Void. Yes, I recommend you boost. For mastery consideration, I would recommend no stupefy so that your parry stun timer is reduced. This is optional, but can definitely help if you accidentally parry and you don't get stuck in this really long window where Morto's got like a long power gain in your SOL. Essentially, it's just a standard Morto. It's frustrating, but still just a standard Morto. Next up is Venom the Duck, and we are halfway through the map over here. Essentially gains max persistent charges and fully loaded RNA bank. Launching any special attacks activates all the buffs stored, so it's not just the L3, any of his special attacks will trigger it. Additionally, he will never activate regeneration buff from the RNA bank. Any Mystic Nullify champion works here. Yes, I recommend you boost. Mystic Dispersion is optional, but it's definitely going to be really, really nice. And it definitely helps with the occasional regeneration he gets if you're running Despair and lots of debuffs. Beware his increased power gain. If you're not nullifying his buffs, letting him launch a special will give you access to buffs to nullify for Mystic Dispersion as well. So just be mindful, like when he has all those buffs, he does have massive power gain. So you do need to nullify those or be prepared to bait multiple specials. Sub Supreme, if you have Doom, but no Mystic Dispersion, Doom is just generally speaking better because he's not reliant on that Mystic Dispersion. Essentially, you just let Venom the Duck launch a special and you periodically, especially when outside of your L3, L2, L2 rotation, it's an easy fight as long as you have Mystic Dispersion. That's Sim Supreme. And if you're using Doom, it's just a standard Doom fight. Potentially, you can use the SP3 rotation, has better damage, but it's definitely longer. This is a much easier fight with Doom. But again, Sim Supreme can do it with higher amounts of Mystic Dispersion. I'd say at least 3, preferably 4. For Morningstar, special 2 all day. Next up is Howard the Duck. Howard the Duck begins the fight with 30 passive indestructible effects. Critical hits and heavy attacks remove 1 charge per hit. Aegon, this is a better fight with crit, Void, or honestly, the Void coin flip is what I'm talking about. Yes, I recommend you boost, except for if you're Void coin flipping. Precision Mastery can help out a little bit, but you should be running it anyways. For all champions, you're going to want to parry heavy until all the charges are removed, so you can get a proper damage window in. And just make sure you parry Howard the Duck at 60 and 30%, because if he triggers the regen, it's a massive regen. And honestly, even the Thunder Quack hurts like a heck ton, so just make sure you parry so you don't have to worry about that. On the flip side, if you're going to use Void for the coin flip method, don't parry when Howard the Duck is at 60% or 30%. Instead, you're just going to hope he triggers the regen and then watch the heal reversal just melt him, and it really, really does melt him. I've seen people take him from 60% to 0%, getting lucky on the 60 and 30% trigger. Just, do keep in mind that is literally a coin flip. Next up is Hyperion. Every 30 seconds, he gains a 15-second unstoppable buff. Nullifying a buff on the defender resets the timer. Mystic Nullify / Power Control champions here are best. Doom, Sim Supreme, Morningstar. Yes, I recommend you buff up. Mystic Dispersion can really, really help. This is a standard Hyperion, though. You should be nullifying the buffs, so the node is relatively not applicable. Generally speaking, I like Doom more than I like Sim here because he's much better at managing the power, but honestly, both are really great. Next up is the champion with the same exact node. Again, Mystic Nullify champions are great here. Yes, I recommend you buff up, boost up. Mystic Dispersion can help out a little bit, but not as much as for the Hyperion. This is a standard the champion fight. You should be nullifying the buffs, so the node is relatively not applicable. And for this one, I actually like Sim more than I like Doom, but honestly, both are really, really great here. Next up is Red Skull. While below 1 bar of power, attacks against Red Skull suffer 90% reduced attack. While below 2 bars, they suffer 50% reduced attack. But while Red Skull is above or at 2 bars of attack of power, attacks gain plus 25% attack. Let me fix this typo, it's going to drive me nuts. Common attackers here are Doom, Nick Fury, Aegon, Magneto, and Corvus. Yes, I recommend you boost up here. Petrify is an option if you're using Magneto. It'll definitely help with the Magneto rotation. If you're using Doom, the standard Doom double Fury rotation is an option. Just make sure that you parry and like medium once or twice before launching your L2, because you want Red Skull at 2 bars of power when you're landing the incinerates. That's the important part, so you're getting the full damage from the incinerates. Another option here is to use Doom L3 only, and I found this a lot more successful personally, but essentially you maintain the double Fury and you keep Red Skull at or above 2 bars of power for as long as possible, and especially when you're launching your L3, and then a lot of your damage comes from the L3. Works very, very well. Next up is if you're using Nick Fury, you're going to set up the unblockable, push Red Skull to the L2, and then stick some bleeds on him. Inevitably, you're going to die to chip damage. Next, if you're using Aegon, this is better if he's unblockable, so you can use that for an opening, but you're going to use the L2s once Red Skull is above 2 bars of power for good bleed damage over time. If you're confident, very confident, you can heavy charge L2 method for big bleeds. It's just tricky, and it could get you killed if he just ends up launching a special too. Next up is Magneto. You're going to want to punish Red Skull's L1 with your heavy to charge and ramp up prowesses, and then you're very carefully going to push him to just barely 2 bars of power, launch the L3. Do keep in mind though that if you have Petrify plus parry can really help not accidentally pushing Red Skull to an L3. It'll definitely help mitigate that, especially when you're launching your L3 if he's stunned. Next up is Bishop. Bishop, critical hits versus Bishop suffer 100% reduced attack. Whenever he is bled, he regenerates 58,000 health over 5 seconds and gains power. Draining 1 or more bars of power in a single instant causes him to suffer 28,000 direct damage. Ignore the whole note. It's mostly irrelevant. You're going to want to use Doom, Torch, Warlock, Magic, someone to these effects. No, you don't need to boost. Maybe a health boost if you're worried about chip damage. But essentially, for all champions, Bishop's in his ability, he gains prowess charges from energy damage. And when he's above 30 charges, he starts to suffer massive amounts of direct damage. This is the fundamental kill method for this whole fight. So if you're using Doom, the shock from your mediums will ramp up the prowess, and then you're going to use the Doom L3 only rotation to keep Bishop from launching specials. Don't let him specials, and this is an absolute free fight. He goes down in like a minute. If you're using Torch, the Incinerates will ramp Bishop's prowess. As Torch, you're going to want to ramp to an L2, and then you're going to want to slow combo Bishop, L2 stun, and then stall as much as possible, because while he's stunned, he's going to be over 30 prowesses from the Incinerate damage, and then you're going to use this to get as big of a damage window as you can. Probably will cost you a free revives, but Torch is a solid option here as well. Next up is Warlock. You're going to want to keep Bishop below 1 bar of power. One good way to do this is to use heavies plus infection to bleed and power drain Bishop. Yes, he's going to be triggering that heal and gaining power simultaneously, but the power drain is really good here. Additionally, just going to spam L1s until Bishop is above 30 prowesses. The shock from your L1s will trigger the prowess gain from Bishop, and then just watch him die. It's mostly a lot of parry L1, but should work pretty good for you. Magic. If you're using Magic, just a standard L2 power lock. Once you've got him power locked, you're going to keep it up. Don't let him special. Limbo will eventually push him to above 30 charges. Next up is Korg. Korg, the attacker, has 100% offensive ability accuracy reduction, except during special attacks. Good common attackers here are Doom, Magneto, Nick, Aegon with adjusted playstyle. Yes, I recommend you boost. Pacify Mastery can help a little bit with the stun shrug. For Doom, double Fury rotation is tricky, to be honest, but a single Fury rotation works very well. Just time the L2 to when Korg does not have rock stacks, so he doesn't shrug the Incinerates. Magneto, energy attack, so no thorns, otherwise it's just a standard Korg. And then for Aegon, it's an adjusted playstyle, essentially shallow light attacks and intercepts, and then baiting heavies. But once you've knocked off the rock shield, you can do the fight normally. And it's just, standard Aegon, and he does honestly have really good damage output for the fight if you can get behind the Aegon method and mechanics needed to take down that Korg. Next up is Havoc. Havoc's node is he has critical hits increase the defender's power rate, and defender gets scaling furies on special attacks essentially for every bar of power he gains over the course of the fight. Common attackers here are Warlock, Dockhock, and Willpower Mastery plus any non-robot. This is the second time you've had to face this Havoc, so you should have a specific counter for him. Yes, I recommend you boost. Willpower is really good if you're not using a Warlock or a robot in general. If you're using Warlock, he is better if awakened. He doesn't need to be, but better if. And he is better the higher sig he has. Essentially, his awakened ability is just free damage versus Havoc. And this is all about the parry heavy or parry counter heavy playstyle. If you want a less punishing playstyle, you could try parry light and then heavy if he's stunned and dash back if he's not. That's very simple. This just gives you an extra moment to respond, because if Havoc does medium, you're not going to get a parry stun. But if he does medium light, you are. But if no matter what, if you go parry, parry, light attack, you will always confirm hit the light attack, and then it'll have you that extra moment to register in your own head whether or not he's stunned. Next up is Doc Ock. You need Doc Ock Awakened if you're using him for this fight. Awakened ability allows power drain on hit when Havoc is power locked. This is going to give you really good damage openings and allows for you to heavy corner Havoc for extended periods of time. And again, that power drain essentially removes the plasma that Havoc is accruing. So it's going to give you longer windows of time where you're not taking plasma detonation. And then willpower plus any non-robot. The feedback heals you. This is a relatively low attack rating Havoc, so a little bit of heavy baiting and willpower gives you really great sustain versus the plasma detonation. It's going to do about 3 to 7% of your health depending on boosting and who you're bringing, etc. So it's really, really not that bad. Obviously, taking a lot of them in quick succession will kill you, but willpower will really help mitigate that, and so you can use pretty much anyone for that fight. For the champion, this is the second time you're taking on the champion. Every 30 seconds, you gain a 15-second unstoppable buff. Nullifying a buff on defender resets the timer. Mystic Nullify is who you're going to want to use here. Yes, I recommend you boost up. Mystic Dispersion can help, but otherwise, this is a standard the champion fight. You should be nullifying buffs, so the node is relatively not applicable. Generally speaking, I like Sim Supreme more than I like Doom, but both of them are really, really great. Next up is Ghost. The defender has permanent armor up. If it is removed, it's on a 15-second cooldown after the armor break expires. Tech champions are immune to AAR and nullify while they have an armor up. While they have an armor up as well, they gain a charge when struck. At 10 charges, they steal the attacker's power. Anyone can do this fight. Yes, I recommend you boost. You don't need any specific masteries, and as long as you mind the charges and don't accidentally push her to an L3, this is a free fight. Now, I made a mistake here, so I'm going to zoom in on Karnak's ability, and I will add it to the spreadsheet after I record this video. But for Karnak, the dexterity and parry masteries do not function in this fight, and both champions are permanently power locked. The attacker suffers minus 50% attack at the start of the fight, but gains plus 2% attack for each hit on their combo meter. Now, this fight is easiest done if you have someone who's unblockable, looking at Aegon, or someone who can really, really easily corner lock Karnak. So you're going to use intercepting and heavy baiting to push Karnak into the corner, and then once he's in the corner, you're going to do a heavy bait to just heavy corner him non-stop. If you have Aegon, you can just do like backdraft intercepting and rely on the unblockable to carry you over. Every once in a while, you're going to get hit, but it's really not that big of a deal. And then finally, the Collector, which I will not be covering in this video. That is the fight-by-fight breakdown for Path 3. As always, I hope it helped. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments, and I'll talk to you all later. Peace.